Came to worship, you might as well worship. I interrupt this service for a praise break. The water's flowing, you might as well get in.
Only God can do it. 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 Come on, church. That's what it feels like when you realize that He's working it out.
Better shout and let it out. I gotta praise, and I gotta get it out. I gotta praise. I gotta praise, and I gotta get it out. I gotta praise. I gotta shout, and I gotta get it out. I gotta shout. Somebody scream. I gotta shout, and I gotta get it out. Somebody shout. I gotta dance, and I gotta get it out. I gotta dance. I gotta dance, and I gotta get it out. I gotta dance. Listen, I gotta run, and I gotta get it out. I gotta run. Listen, can somebody give God a jump praise? Just a jump praise. Just jump. If you can't jump, just wave your hand. When I say holla, you say hallelujah, holla. When I say holla, you say hallelujah, holla. When I say holla, you say hallelujah, holla. I say holla, you say hallelujah, holla. Say go Jesus, go Jesus, go. 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 Somebody scream. And for these blessings we'll lift our hearts with praise. Without a doubt we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. Without a doubt we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. Say it one more time. Without a doubt we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. Oh, hug the people on both sides and you say, I needed that, 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 I needed that. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough time. You don't know like I know what the Lord has done for me. Stand to your feet all over the building. I'm going to switch here to this handheld and boost me up. Don't be stingy with the volume. Amen. Eternal everlasting God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this wonderful manifestation of your Spirit. We thank you for that the waters of the Jordan are rushing. The tide is high and the current is swift. And now we step into the troubling waters for the healing of our psyches and our souls. Now, God, in the midst of this exultant praise, we've prepared a landing pad for you. For we know that where praises go up, blessings will come down, and that you inhabit the praises of your people. God, we've come this morning zealously, generously, making sacrifice of praise. Now, God, we need to move from praise to purpose. And so, God, we just pray that you would incline our ears to hear, our eyes to see, and our hearts to receive bread from heaven. Lord, feed us till we want no more. Let your word go forth, never to come back void, but accomplish a purpose for which it is sent. In the name of Christ we pray, and God, we give you thanks. Let us all say together, amen. Amen. We're standing all over the building. Just put your hands together and give God praise offering. Amen. This feels more like a Friday night revival meeting. Amen. This ain't a service, this is service. Amen. Touch your neighbor, high five, say, this church here, this church here. This, I didn't say this. This church here. Church. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's right. I want to turn your attention to the book of Judges, and I want to take snippets of a long narrative, and for the interest of time, just take pieces of it. Judges, the 13th chapter, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 7, reach down and snatch verse 24, then jettison over to chapter 16 and catch some verses. So just follow me and we'll get there. Judges, the 13th chapter. Sister Sharon, who we call the Voice, she told us he'd work it out, and he did. That's what you said. She said it, and he did it. Amen. I got ready to walk toward the pulpit, and the Holy Spirit said, where you going? I ain't done yet. Amen. Beginning with the first verse of the 13th chapter, I'm reading from the New International Version. Again. It's almost hard to believe. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was sterile and remained childless. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may be used on his head, because this boy is going to be a Nazarite, set apart to God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistine. I want to jump from there down to verse 24.
The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Manadan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. Now jettison over to chapter 16. Beginning with the first verse, it says, one day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, Samson is here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we'll kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. And then he got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the two posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them above his shoulders, carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure Samson into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Verse 20. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him to grinding in the prison, but the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Scripture as it is written. May God add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of his most holy word. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord and each other. I want to end this series of sermons under the general title of the Avengers. This is Avengers Part 7 with the subtitle, The Out of Control Leader. The out of control leader. To make it more personal to you and I, the out of control believer. And I want each of you to reach across somebody who's within arm's reach and say to them, neighbor, it ain't how much power you have. It's how much power you can handle. Joe Radliff, who's the power of Brentwood Baptist Church in Houston, Texas, a church of some 10,000 plus members, tells the story of when he was first able to get an exotic foreign sports car. He said he was well into the throes of his middle-age crisis. His children were grown. He finally could spend a little of his money on his own self. And he bought him a foreign car that cost far more money than he wanted to publicly confess. And he went out on a long stretch of land outside Houston where there was nobody but him, road, and the Lord. He said he got him some shades that wrapped around the side. It was a convertible with a sunroof where the roof came down. And he had a baseball cap and he turned it backward. And the speedometer said the car went up to 240 miles an hour. And he wanted to experience the power of all 240 miles. So he went out there where there's nobody but him, road, and God. And he said, car, give me all you got. I want to feel your power. He said he hit the accelerator and he said that car jumped from 0 to 60 instantaneously. You couldn't even hear the engine burn. He said he floored it even more and he said he zoomed past 100 like it was nothing. He said he got to 120, 130 and he said you still couldn't even tell that the car was going. He said, but then all of a sudden as he got around 180, he had to start hitting the brakes. He said, not because the car started shaking, but because he started shaking. He throttled down from there. He said to this day he has no idea what it feels like to be above 180 miles an hour because the car had more power than he could stand. Ain't how much power you have, it's how much you can handle. I'm a comic book fan, and I was so excited when they got to this new current neo comic book era where they start making motion pictures of comic book figures that superheroes that we used to watch in Saturday mornings or in comic books. And when the first Superman episode came out, I went to see Superman, and there he was in the crystal cave, and listening to a recording of his father, who was long since dead, who was a scientist on the planet of Krypton, explained to him that in Earth's atmosphere he would have superpowers. And then warned him, he said, son, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. It ain't how much power you have, it's how much you can handle. That's the story behind the story of the life of the one who's called Samson, who is the epitome of all of the judges, those leaders during this time of Israel settling into the land after a time of conquest under Joshua. And I refer to them playfully as the Avengers. He is the epitome of them and the culmination of this succession of leaders who become more complicated as the people go along. And we get to Samson, whose life is a riddle of what not to do. My grandfather used to say, you're going to be good for something, if nothing but to be a good example of what not to be. The text tells us that Samson came along at a time where the Philistines had oppressed Israel for 40 years. And during that period of time, after they had oppressed them for 40 years, that the Lord came to a woman who had been barren and childless and said, you're going to have a child. But when you have this child, even during your pregnancy, don't you drink any fermented drink. Don't you eat anything unclean. And the reason why he's given her this prenatal regimen, not just because it makes sense, because any doctor today would say that, but they didn't have the benefit of modern medical science. The angel is giving her these prenatal instructions because they're consistent with the spiritual regulations that would be upon the child that she is to birth, because he is uniquely going to be called to the office of a Nazarite, not a Nazarene, which is a citizen from Nazareth where Jesus grew up, but a Nazirite, which was a select elite priestly office. A Nazirite was one who was set apart and consecrated for the service of the Lord. They could be for a select designated period of time, or they could be for their whole life or something in between. The Nazirite vow could be made by the person themselves, who between them and God covenant for this select elite time of service, or it could be made between God and their parents and imposed upon the child, who would then have to live out the vow that was made between God and them. A Nazirite, the regulations included that they were neither during any time of their Nazirite service, whether a limited period of time or for life in the instance of Samson, they were not to eat or drink any product of the fruit of the vine, never to know the zest and the zip and the merrymaking potential of the wine, or any product made from the grape, nor even to move among the vineyard. Strictly regulated to be set apart. They were not to touch any dead animal, nor touch anything that came from a dead animal. To do so was to render oneself sacramentally unclean. They were to be chaste during this period of time. C-H-A-S-T-E, not C-H-A-S-E-D. Chaste meant that they were supposed to adhere to strict sexual regulations. Have you seen from previous stories that there was two separate expectations in terms of sexual mores for men versus women in Hebrew culture? Women were expected to be pure, even proving sheets, bloody sheets, to confirm their virginity on the night of their wedding. And if there was no blood, they could be taken back to the doorposts of their father's house, and their father and their brothers would cast the first stones to stone them to death for their uncleanness. Meanwhile, men, basically the boys could be boys. But in the case of a Nazirite, he was held to the same strict sexual regulations as the women. So on their wedding night, they were to be just as unfamiliar with the adult recreation as were the females. And during this period of time, they were to be exemplar in all of their conduct. Nothing profane was to fall from their lips. Their lips were to be reserved for blessing of the name of the Lord, and no defilement nor cursing to come forth. And no razor was to touch the locks of their hair, for the locks of their hair was to be the symbol of God's power. Their locks were to grow long, because like the train of a woman's dress was to symbolize the wealth and significance of the family. The longer the train, the greater the prominence of the family, the longer the locks, symbolic of the greater power of God that is coursing through them. She and her prenatal care were to begin to practice the regulations that would be binding upon this young boy's life throughout his life. And when he was born, she called his name Samson. He was the greatest of all of Israel's Avengers. He was to Hebrew literature what Achilles was to Greek literature in terms of its warrior, perfect in form and in power. Oh, but for that little troublesome heel that brought down Achilles, Samson had far more trouble than just a little heel. He had power unsurpassed. You'll notice that in all of the other judges, if you go back and read the book, and I trust that you've been reading with me as we've gone along, each of the previous Avengers, whether it was Othniel who took down Cushan Rishathaim, whether it was Ehud who took down Eglon, who came with a coalition of kings and armies from Edom and Moab and Ammon, or whether it was Deborah and her sidekick Jael who took down King Jabin and the Canaanite people, helped along by General Cisneros, the mercenary who led his armies, or whether it was Gideon who led them against the Midianites, who were like a swarm of locusts, even Abimelech, who was the villainous king that the people had to take him out because the king became the problem. Each one, and even Jephthah that we dealt with at the early service today, and I pray that you get that tape, each one of them, the power of God that allowed these ordinary people to do extraordinary things came upon them at the time of crisis. God gave them a special apportionment of power to take out the villain and turn the people's faith and attention back to the God that they had forsaken in their idolatrous ways, where they bowed at the very same pagan altars they were instructed by God to tear down. And the power of God would come upon them to resolve the crisis. Then it would come off them and they would go back into civilian life after peace and prosperity was restored. But in the case of Samson, it's long before he was called to fight any battles or address any emergencies. As a child, the Spirit of God was already on him. Oh, he was set apart. But didn't show up in the lives of others till their adulthood and their maturity. As a child, this boy, the power of God was on him when he was in the early education program. The power of God was on him in play school, in preschool. The power of God was on him in the nursery. I don't know if he tore up his bottle or crushed it with his hands. I don't know. I don't know if the power of God was that child. I don't know when his mama went to whoop him, he whooped her instead. I don't know. All I know is as a child, the power of God. God gave him a double portion, a triple portion. His cup was running over. He was saturated with the power of God like no other. He was the warrior's warrior. And he was called to begin, not end. Ironically, all of the other judges, Avengers if you may, completed a deliverance of the children of Israel and restored peace to the land. But it said he was called to begin the deliverance of the Philistines because of all the enemies that they had faced before: the Midianites, the swarm of locusts, the coalition of the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Edomites, the Canaanites, the northern tribes of those who were with Cushan Rishathaim. All of these enemies had been put down and subdued, but the Philistines would plague Israel for centuries. Oh, yes. You remember the story about David and Goliath? He was among the Philistine people. 2.5 centuries after these events that unfold in this passage, they were still battling the Philistines. It was the enemy that would go nowhere. It was the problem for which there would be no end. He was only beginning of centuries of battles with what would become a natural enemy for Israel: the Philistines. He was uniquely empowered to deal with a unique enemy. God gave him capacity equivalent to the size of the villain that he would face, a people who simply would not within their lifetime be put down. And he was the leader who within their lifetime they would see none like him in all the earth. He was called to begin the deliverance of the Philistine people, but he was a man who had as many contradictions as he had gifts. Starting with the fact that one of the problems he had in being effective at delivering the people of God from the Philistines is he had a fetish for Philistine women. It's hard to deliver your people from the enemy when you're sleeping with the enemy. It's right there in the text. It says at the beginning, you read your Bible, see if it reads the same as my Bible. It says that he went down to Timnah, which was Philistine territory. And it says that he saw there a young Philistine woman, and he returned to his father and mother and said, I want to marry her. And he wanted them, consistent with the Hebrew culture, customs, to go make arrangements. Now, understand, the prohibition here was not against interethnic They didn't even use the term race then, intercultural marriage, because there's too much of that exhibited throughout Israel's history, including Moses, who married the Ethiopian woman. That was nothing. This was about religion, because it is said in Judges 2:2, make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. I want you to tear down their altars, not bow before them. And like Ahab, fooling around with Jezebel, if you marry them, you become one with them, even in spirit. And what they worship, you'll end up worshiping, if but for no other reason than to keep peace with them. Huh? And this is about a people remaining religious fidelity. And in this day and time, different tribes had tribal gods. It was a given that a person of another tribe brought another religion. And keeping covenant with God and having no other gods before them meant that you had to enter into covenant with people who worship the same God as you. So there was a problem, and that's why his parents predictably say to him at the request of going down and making arrangements with a Philistine family to plan a wedding with their Hebrew son, who's called to deliver them from the Philistines to marry a Philistine daughter. And they say to him, can't you find one Hebrew girl? All these sisters running around here. Can't you find one of your own? She says one of your relatives, because they could marry close relatives back then. And I realize that's venturing off into nastiness according to our current proclivities. Or one of our countrywomen, the daughters of Israel, to marry. But he insisted, he was persistent. But one thing he lacked was the ability to listen. When you got great gift, but you don't listen to nobody but your doggone self, you're already headed toward trouble. Touch your neighbor and say, you got to listen to somebody but your doggone self. Sometimes great gifts, when you are the most talented person in the room, the smartest person, the most educated person, the most musically gifted person, sometimes great gifts fools us into thinking that we don't have to listen to the lesser gifted people. But don't nobody know it all, and don't nobody know enough to not listen to somebody else. And gifted people suffer from not listening to nobody because they think their gifts have elevated them above the need to check in or consult with anybody else. His mama, including mama and daddy, he insisted, and so they capitulated. And they went to go down from the high country of Dan down to Timnah and to Philistine character to meet her parents and to begin making arrangements. And while they went down there, at some point in the walk, the slow walk down there, he detoured from his parents. He finds himself walking in the vineyard. Strike one. He's a Nazirite. He not only is not supposed to eat any food or beverage from the fruit of the vine, he's not even supposed to be in the beverage or in the vineyard. He's walking in the vineyard we don't know why he's there. Maybe he wants to see what's so exciting about the vineyard, since his mama been telling him all his life, stay away from that. You know how it is. The quickest way to get somebody to do something is to tell them they can't. So he's checking out vineyards in violation of his Nazirite vow. He's already on a slippery slope. While he's in there, a not so novel experience occurs. Lions, who were drawn by the sweetness of the grape, oftentimes prowled around, left their caves, and came among the vineyards. And a lion attacked him. And since the power of God was more readily available to him than the other judges for whom the power of God was accessible and sufficient for the time of crisis, his simply was available, seemed to be 24/7. When the lion attacked him with his bare hands, he ripped the lion apart right there in the vineyard as if it was nothing. Didn't even break a sweat doing so, ripped him apart and left him there. Left the king of carnivores there on the ground and walked on. Rejoins his parents as they meet the young Philistine girl's parents, and then some other time he detours, he walks past the carcass of the lion again, this dead carcass, and he sees bees humming around it, and he opens it up and sees that the bees have started to make honey in the carcass of the lion, and he reaches in there with his bare hands and takes a scoop of honey, and it's good, and he licks it, and then he takes some to his parents. But the writer is careful to tell us that his parents don't know where he got it from, because if his parents had known, he scooped it out of a dead carcass, and that violated sacred regulations. They would not have touched it. So he has, unbeknown to them, serving them something that is spiritually toxic. Straight to. And while he's there, while he's sitting there sumptuously eating what he's not supposed to be eating, we find out that he's a rapper. He's got some rhyme and some flow, and he starts spitting rhyme out. And he practices a poem that he springs on his bridegroomsmen at the wedding party. Now, according to the custom, that at the wedding, the groom was responsible for paying for a pre-wedding festival. And since they're getting married in Philistine territory, he don't know any Philistines. The woman's family gives him 30 groomsmen. It has to be lavish to bespeak the means of both respective families. 30 men are given to him, and each are responsible to buy their own tuxedo, or the cultural equivalent of such. But Samson decides he's a little merry now. He's been hanging out in the vineyards, washing it down with a little bit of honey, and he says to them, "Listen, I got a riddle. I don't know how you Philistine brothers get down, but I got a riddle for you." He says, "Listen," he says, "I'm going to tell you a riddle. And if you can figure out the riddle," he says, "then I will pay for everybody's tuxedo. Patent leather shoes, socks, suspenders, and bow tie and all. But if you can't figure it out, then y'all got to get together. Not only got to buy your tuxedo, your clothes, your gear, and come correctly geared up for the wedding, but you got to give me 30 sets of clothes." And the Philistine people were known for making war, but they were not particularly wealthy people. The challenge of not only buying their own uniform for the wedding, but to come up with 30 more series of clothes for Samson was going to be an economic challenge. And he said, "Here's the riddle. Riddle me this." He says, "Out of the eaters, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Now he's referring to the experience with the lion, but nobody knows that except him. They have to take the challenge because he has put it on them, but the economic reality is still what it is. They can't afford to do that, so they go to the Philistine girl, because while he's marrying Samson, he's still one of them. She's marrying him, but she's still one of them. That's one of the reasons why his mom and daddy say, "You might want to stay with your own because you don't know where this chick's loyalties lie." They go to them and it says, "Wait a minute now, this boy putting something on us we can't afford. You one of us." He said, "Now listen, tell us the meaning of the riddle." So she goes to him and she does what a lot of women's ace in the hole is when you're trying to move a man and a strong man at that. Tears, when don't nothing else work. Tears. She starts to cry in business. In some culture, tears are more effective than ours. In our culture, tears simply get you a Kleenex and people keep it pushing. We've come over a way that where tears has been watered and tread a path through the blood of the slaughtered. You got to come with it more than that. But there are cultures in which tears are like kryptonite to a strong man. And he says to her, after 3 days they can't figure out the riddle. They go to her at a back channel. It goes to a back channel. And you got to get him to tell us this thing so that we don't have to buy these clothes. And she says, "Samson, we're supposed to be getting married. We're supposed to be one. Tell me what the riddle is. We're supposed to be man and wife, supposed to be one." He said, "I ain't even told my mom and daddy what I'm going to tell you." She said, "Come on." She starts crying some more. He can't stand to see her cry. So he tells her. Day 7, they come and he's say, "Okay, y'all know the riddle." And they blurt it out. They say, "What's stronger than the lion and what's sweeter than honey?" Drop mic. Now he knows the only person he's told is his fiance. And we also know that he can spit rhyme on the spot. So even in his anger, he expresses it by an open mic, on the spot improv of a very profane nature. He says, only because you've been plowing with my heifer did you figure out the riddle. Typically, they strapped a plow to a bull, and the bull pulled the plow. Every now and then in dire times when there were no bulls, they would strap it to a cow who normally was reserved for milking. But in dire times when there's no bulls, you'd use a cow. And another slang name for a cow was a heifer. And in his anger now, we find that the man whose lips were supposed to be reserved for the praise of God and never to speak that which is profane, because his riddle has been told, because he told her, he learned that the best way to keep a secret is not tell anybody. Because you can't control who the person you talk to talks to. And now that he finds out that the woman, of all her virtues, confidentiality is not one, he blurts out on the spike. I don't know if it had some beats behind him or not. He said, if you hadn't been messing with my heifer. Gives in you an estimation of his attitudes about women. If you hadn't been messing with my heifer, you would not have been able to figure out the riddle. So now in his anger, the man whose office that he holds suggests a humility and a temperance, supposed to be an even-tempered man. Because now the secret has been told, because he told it first and he can control who she told it to, he throws a temper tantrum and he goes into town and randomly accosts 30 men and overpowers them, yokes them, strips them buck naked down to their socks, their shoes, and undergarments, takes the 30 sets of clothes, goes back to the groomsmen, says, you want 30 sets of clothes? Here they are. There's 30 accosted, assaulted, naked men somewhere in town. He's used the gift of God not to deliver Israel, not to glorify God, but to settle scores. Be careful when you use the gift that God gave you for God's glory and you're weaponizing it to settle scores. God gives no one gift of endowment or position to use it to settle scores. And he throws 30 sets of clothes, and then it says that he gets angry now. And he says, and he goes to his father's house. He assaults 30 men, assaults them, strips them naked, slings the clothes at the men who figured out the riddle only because he told it first, and then goes and chills at his father's house. And know that in doing so, he has missed the wedding. So while he is sulking, the wedding has come and gone. Meanwhile, his would-be father-in-law, who had to pay for the wedding, he had to pay for the festival, but he had to pay for the wedding. And the guests who came for a week to eat and to drink. And everything else he put into it. And he looked around and Samson does not come after a while. And in his mind, Sarah, he says, somebody getting married. Since I can't get my deposits back, he then takes her and gives her, since Samson pounded off, stomped off, he's thinking he don't want her no more. So he then gives the daughter, his daughter that Samson wanted, he gives her to the best man. They have a wedding, it just don't include Samson. Sometime later, when Samson's temper comes down, he grabs a goat, a small goat, which was in the custom a peace offering, decides now he wants to make up, and decides he's going to go and see his now former fiance. He's thinking it's still his fiance. He wants to go in a room, and the father steps in front of her and says, she married now. You wasn't here. And somebody was getting married after I put out all my money. I gave her to your friend. He was here. Now she got a baby sister, and in my opinion, she's more attractive than her. But this one is already gone. Samson, then, we find in one of his other flaws as a leader with great power, he never takes responsibility for the consequences of his own actions. She's not married now to somebody else because she betrayed him. She's married now to somebody else because he was missing in action. He was no call, no show, no call. But instead he gets angry and he says, oh, I will take my revenge now. And so he went out and takes these superpowers that God has given him. He catches 300 foxes. He's fast enough to run down the fox, strong enough to take them in pairs and make 150 pairs of foxes with their long tails. He literally takes the tails, ties them together like a bow, sticks a torch in between them, turns them loose into the olive orchards, into the vineyards, and into the grain fields, the three staples of their local economy: the raising and the harvesting of grain, the producing of the olives, and the making of the wine from the fruit of the vine. And they go into the fields and they burn up the local crop, destroying the local economy as his retribution. When he destroys the local economy, people said, who has done this? They said, Samson, who was the Timnite's son-in-law. He actually wasn't the son-in-law, but he was supposed to be the son-in-law. And so the men of that town, they rise up and they go to Samson's would-be father-in-law and would-be bride, who's now married to somebody else, and they come with tiki torches like the skinheads in Charlottesville, and they literally burn them to death. They pay the price for Samson's foolishness. When Samson learns that his would-be father-in-law has been killed and his would-be wife has been killed, he still never stops and says, this happened because of me. It's always somebody else's fault. He says, now I'll really take revenge. He's already accosted and assaulted 30 men and stripped them naked and took their clothes. He's already burned down all the local crops with foxes. Now it says he just randomly goes into Philistine territory and says he slaughtered many. They don't even bother to count. The bodies are everywhere, like Abimelech on steroids. And then he goes and hides out at the cave at Edom. And nobody knows where to find him because he's off the grid. He's a grown man throwing a tantrum, and now he's on the DL. He's on the down low. And while he's in the cave, the men from the Philistines, they're like, wait a minute. He's a Hebrew. And they go to Judah and encamp around Judah to attack all the Jews there in Judah. And they then somebody found them, and they said, Samson, do you know what you've done? They are our masters. Like it or not, they sign our paychecks. They got soldiers all around the territory. You need to surrender to them so they then will attack us. Samson says, well, are you always going to attack me? No, we just going to tie you up and give you to them, and the rest of us between you and them. So Samson pretends to go along with it. They tie him up, take him out to the Philistines. When the Philistines see them coming, it says that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson. In other words, that the power of God that has been coursing through him and seems to be accessible to him 24/7, as they come toward him screaming, the power, the unique power and endowment God gave him, he breaks their binds as it is nothing. And he looks onto the ground and he sees the jawbone of a donkey. Now, NIV says donkey. King James more accurately translates it off of Hebrew now. It says the jawbone of an ass. That's what they call the donkey, an ass. And he goes into rhyming again, another improv. He picks up the jawbone of the ass and he slaughters 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey because it was particularly sharp and often weaponized. And when he's done, he stands over their remains with rhyme. And he says, with the jawbone of an ass, I've killed 1,000. With the jawbone and an ass, I've made asses out of them. With the jawbone of an ass, I've killed 1,000 men. What? With the jawbone of an ass, I've made asses out of them. With the jawbone of an ass, I've killed 1,000 men. What? With the jawbone of an ass, I've made asses out of them. With the jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men. What? With the jawbone of an ass. He's rapping over the remains, throws it down, and it says that, and Samson ruled for 20 years. In other words, everybody left this man alone. alone. He's beating up men and stripping them naked and taking their clothes, and can't nobody stop him. He's chasing down foxes, tying their tails and burning up all the crops. Can't nobody stop him. He's taking the jawbone of an ass. He's breaking their binds and killing up untold numbers of people, slaughtering them in the streets. And now with the jawbone of ass, he's killed 1,000 armed soldiers with a simple household weapon, the decomposing remains of a mule. With the jawbone of an ass, he's made an ass out of those who thought that they could handle him. And as he does so, it says that now in the land, and we're not even talking about the episode where it says he goes into Gaza. And it says he goes in with a prostitute. Now he's supposed to be chaste, C-H-A-S-T-E, not C-H-A-S-E-D. But instead, him and Robert Kraft go into, I'm sorry, I don't know how that got in there. My bad. He goes in with the sexual entrepreneur. And they find out, they said, Samson's down here in Gaza. And so they the Philistines surround the camp. And they said, we're going to get him at morning. But he wasn't planning on staying till morning. He was going to do his business and bounce. So in the middle of the night, realizing that they're waiting on him, Rodelia, he's thinking, since y'all may have forgotten about the jawbone episode, y'all need to know who you dealing with. He gets up in the middle of the night when he's finished his business. And I don't know where Kraft goes, but he then walks to the gates of the city, puts his hand on the reinforced gates of the city that was designed to hold back the pressure of an army. And he's an army of one. Not only the door, but the frame of the door, he rips it off of the city gate, lifts it over his head, walks to the top of a mountain, and while everybody's watching, and throws it down, and like Alonzo says, King Kong ain't got on me. And for 20 years, he rules Israel. But you know, you can be bully if you want to. And people may, for the sake of the power that you can bully them with, they may leave you alone for sake of survival, but they don't necessarily go nowhere. They just lay in the cut and they watch you till you show them how to take you down. With Achilles, it was his heel. But with Samson, they just noticed what kind of women he liked. He liked women who get paid by the hour from the other tribe. And so he goes into a woman named Delilah. And he was these kind of dudes that actually, and when you're caught up in the throes of the erotic solipsism of mechanical sex, he actually believes the hype, the sexual hype that's talked and all the I love yous. Oh, I love you too, baby. Says he falls in love with her. I'm in love with a stripper. Somebody touch your neighbor and say, for real? He in love with a stripper. So there he is with Stormy. Delilah. I'm off my game today. I'm off my game. And they just watch him. We see his strength, but we've watched him long enough to see his weakness. Paul says we're living epistles for all men to read. And if don't nobody else pay attention to you, your enemies will. They will lay in the cut, just like they laid in the cut for Jesus. They will lay in the cut for me and you till you tell them how to take you down. They'll simply feed your obvious appetite. And when he left Delilah, they went to Delilah. And they said, we've noticed two things about him. We know what kind of women he liked, And we know that the women can get him talking like his former fiance. So he went to Delilah because she's used to getting paid for her services. They said, we'll give you 11 shekels apiece if you will tell us the secret to his strength. We know he like you. We know he come through. We know he come through, particularly around the time of the Super Bowl and stuff. He gonna roll through. So just tell us the secret of his strength. Give him what he want, and then when he get relaxed, just ask him a few questions. She said, baby, tell Boo the secret of your strength. He said, baby, he said, so you want to play with her? She said, tell me the secret of your strength, how we can tie you up. Because Samson didn't like it regular. He had a little freak in him. Come on now. I know y'all Baptists, but you made your babies the old-fashioned way. Stop it, stop it, stop it. He liked to be tied up. He liked to play games with it. All the ladies in the house say, no, he didn't. All the brothers in the house say, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He liked to be tied up. I mean, he's going to these women, you pay them for fantasy. That's what they tell me. And he went in there and he said, well, tie a bow cord, the bow to the bow and arrow, tie it around me and I'll lose my strength. So she did it. She tied him up while he was asleep. And she said, Samson, the Philistines are on you. And he jumped, he popped them cords like it was nothing. She said, baby, you lied to me. I'm serious. You know, we supposed to be close, boo. Why don't you just tell me? I ain't gonna tell nobody. You know, in my business, you got to be discreet. I ain't going to tell nobody. He said, all right. He said, take some binding cords that we tether animals with and tie me up, and that take away my strength. So they did it. She tied him up. She told Philistine, come on. She said, Samson, the Philistines are on you. You got to be popped up like it wasn't that. She said, boo, you keep lying to me. You come in here, I treat you real good. We play all these little games you like. And I ain't asked you for nothing other than my pay and a good tip. And just tell me the secret of your hair. I ain't going to tell nobody. And she said, so finally it says that he burdened her. And it's the same word that was used and with Jephthah in that text about him. It says, when the Lord told the children of Israel, I'm tired of you turning to these gods, turn to them. It said that the Lord wearied of seeing them suffer. He was exasperated. He was frustrated. And so Samson here in Kara, it says he was frustrated. He was tired. In other words, she wore him down asking. She just kept asking and crying and asking. And he tended to have a soft spot. And he said, okay, you know, the locks of my hair are the symbol of my power. I'm not supposed to have no razor touch the locks of my hair. What the heck? I mean, I wasn't supposed to drink either. I did that. And I wasn't supposed to touch no dead corpse. I did that. And that didn't stop me. Still got my strength. You know, and I ate that honey that came out. I wasn't supposed to do that. And I wasn't supposed to do all that cussing. I've been cussing. See, when you get away with it, you start thinking that you're invincible. Sometimes God is like your mama, just give you enough rope. Come on, somebody. He done violated so many vows seemingly without consequences. So what's the big deal about the hair? So he says, well, if you cut the locks of my hair, then my strength will go. She said, oh, okay, baby. Go sleep. Go sleep. Shh. Go sleep. He goes to sleep, and she cuts the locks of his hair. And then she jumps up and says, Samson, the Philistines are on you. And he jumps up and he reaches for his strength. That's always been there. He's always been able to sing. Just sing. Just give him a mic. He's always been able to dance. Just turn the music on. He's always been able to stand in front of the boardroom and wax eloquent on the goals and the objectives of the organization. talk about the market shares and the movement up and down the Dow Jones. He's always been able to show up work late and not do his homework the night before, and on the way to the car while he's sitting there at the red lights and take a look at his notes and amass the information to stand before him and make him think that he studied all night. He's always been able to preach the sermon without much practice. He's always been able to pass the test without much study because he just had a good memory like that. He's always been able to get on the court and outperform the other athletes without even working out because he was just naturally gifted, naturally faster, naturally stronger. His gifts have been so impressive. There's been such a gap between him and everybody else that he's begun to take them for granted, and he reaches for them, and for the first time he reaches for the power, and it says, and God left him. The words none of us ever want to hear. And God left him. Touch your neighbor and say, that ain't good when God leaves you. It ain't, I can handle it if you leave me, or if you leave me, or if you leave me. I lose one friend, I just get another friend. It ain't no problem if one church puts you out. I've been run out and started another one. But if God leave you, you in trouble. If God leave you, something gonna be different when you start to sing. If God leave you, something gonna be different if you start to preach. If God leave you, something gonna be different when you try to lead. If God leave you, your body ain't gonna act right. Your mind gonna get confused. Your joy ain't gonna be the same. Ain't gonna feel the same, look the same, do the same. He reached for the power, and the power wasn't there because he found out that while the power ran through him, the power was not from him. And now he's cut off from the source of his power. Like the Black Panther, stripped of the powers, and now he's got to fight as a mortal man. And they tied him up. They've been waiting a long time for this. He'd been living on God's grace and mercy. He took it for granted. Didn't realize all them drinks you had, the reason why you never died from alcohol poisoning, because the Lord didn't let it poison you. All them drugs didn't take you out. It's because there's a doctor that's never lost a patient. Why that time in prison wasn't the end of your time, it's because God set you free, not the parole board. All them crazy relationships didn't drive you absolute crazy because the Lord gave you peace of mind. But this time the Lord wasn't with him, and they grabbed him, Mary, and they took him and they bound him up, and he couldn't break these binds, and then they gouged out his eyes, an ultimate humiliation, and then they put him down in the granaries, and they made him just push the turnstile, the millstone, like a mule. Yeah, like the mules who used to pull the plows. You know, those asses that used to pull the plow. He made asses out of them till they could make an ass out of him. Now here he is, the strongest man, a slave, blind. He made an ass out of them till they could make an ass out of him. Thinking of his life, so much potential was supposed to lead his people in deliverance. But all his fetishes, all his undisciplined life, all of his unprincipled ways, as he's done and meted out to others, so now they have meted out to him. And there he is. All the promise of his life has been betrayed, left undone. It's a sad, sad, sad a picture of what could have been, what should have been, what was supposed to have been. What a waste. Has there ever been a waste of such intelligence? Have there ever been a squandering of such potential? Has there ever been just a throwing away of such promise? Has there ever been a shattering, a greater shattering of dreams? Have there ever been a greater frustration and grieving of the Holy Spirit? There he is, the powerful man, in form, in endowment. God had gifted no one greater than Samson. But it's not how much power you have, it's how much you can handle. It's how well you steward it. It's not what you got, it's what you do with it. He was the proverbial elephant that strained out barely a peanut. He had nothing to show for his life except burned bridges and enemies, and now blind eyes and the shame of being a slave to the people he was called by God to deliver his entire nation from. And in his regret, finally, the only time in this sad, sad story that he calls on God is when the damage is undoable. You can reach the point where there is irreversible damage. God may forgive you, but he don't give you back the years. God may forgive you, but you're still HIV positive. God may forgive you, but you still got cirrhosis of the liver. God may forgive you, but that marriage is still over. God may forgive you, but your children still don't talk to you. God may forgive you, but you still got that felony sitting on your record forever, frustrating your job opportunities. God may forgive you, but the consequences are still there, bitter. And he says to the Lord, if, not certain, you, O merciful God, who seems to have a weakness yourself, and that you can't resist people's honest petitions for help. That's the one weakness God got. God simply seemed like he can't help himself when somebody honestly calls on him, no matter how bad they've messed up. You can't fool God, because he can see the heart, but God can also see when the person who's messed up. You can be a liar and a rat like Cohen, but if you have an honest moment, God will know if you're lying again or if you having an honest moment. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. Sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I had to hit rock bottom. Sorry I had to make such a fool out of me and your namesake. But while on others thou art calling, right here, right now, Savior, do not pass me by. God, if you give me back just a little bit of that strength, one more time, I will do in death what I failed to do in life and begin the deliverance of my people. And God, who cannot help himself when it comes to an honest cry from the most sinful petitioner, God, sir, turns on the spigot of divine power. It started coursing through him one more time. And while the Philistines were celebrating too early, doing an end zone dance before the clock ticked all the way down, Samson asked the little boy during his break, he said, little boy, can you just take me to the pillars that hold this thing up? I got just a few fireworks I want to add to the celebration today. That little slave boy who thought as bad as Samson has been, that what they did to him was cold-blooded, and led him to the pillars of the temple. And he said, put my left hand on one pillar, put my right hand on the other pillar. I can't see, but just put them there where I can feel them. And then, son, I'll give you a little bit of advice. Get about as far away from this mother as you can, because it's about to go down. Lord, my yesterdays defiled your name. Oh, but God, today, let this be the day that the Lord hath made. And if I'm going to go out, I want to take as many of them with me to do in death what I never did in life. And all the power of God started coursing through him like it did on that day at Mount Carmel when God sent the jagged configurations of lightning and blew up the altar and burned wet wood. And he pushed those columns and the roof came down. And in death, he killed more Philistines for God's glory than he did during his long, sad, and sorry life. And all we find with the story of Samson, that my brothers and my sisters, sometimes it's not how much power we have, it's how well we steward it. It's not how smart you are, it's how wise you are with that brilliant brain of yours. It's not how beautiful you are physically on the outside, it's the beauty of your character on the inside. There's an old saying that says, don't let your charisma take you where your character can't keep you. Have I got a witness? And oh, Samson is a good show of what not to be. No matter how gifted you are, you can't be so stubborn you don't listen to nobody but yourself. I don't care how much you know, a wise man giveth unto counsel. You still got to listen to somebody. Have I got a witness? You may be the first person in your family to go to college. Mom and daddy still got some good advice for you. Have I got a witness? You may have a house by the lake, but that don't guarantee your house gonna be a home. Have I got a witness? You may have an expensive car to drive, but what matters to God is what's driving you. Have I got a witness? It doesn't matter how much strength that you have. Have I got a witness? The only thing that matters is, can you stand on the promises of God? Have I got a witness? Not by power, nor by might, but by my spirit. Samson had to die to do something good for the Lord. He lived so bad, only in dying could he do something for the Lord. Well, I come to tell you, my brothers and sisters, don't wait till your deathbed to try and listen to God. Have I got a witness? Don't wait till the test comes back bad before you stand the test. Don't wait till you've ruined your life before you start to live it for God. Have I got a witness? Touch your neighbor and say, neighbor, now is the time to start handling your power. Come on, touch somebody else. Say, neighbor, now is the time to handle your business before your business handles you. Reach back and grab somebody who looked like they don't want to be grabbed and said, friend, I'm trying to tell you, you got too much to be doing so little with it. Now is the time to let God get a hold of you. Can I tell you one more story? Yeah, Samson couldn't bless God until he died, and that's so sad. But there was somebody else who blessed God when he died. There was somebody else who was wounded for my transgressions. There was somebody else who was bruised for my iniquities. There was somebody else, his chastisement was the price of our peace. He lived good and died even better. And because he died, I now can live. Have I got a witness? Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, my fear is gone. Because I know who holds my future, my sad life still worth the living. Because he lives, it ain't never too late to turn it around. It ain't never too late to clean it up. It ain't never too late to fix what's broken. Have I got a witness? If you just put your hand back in God's hand, it's not a matter of God coming back to you, it's you coming back to God. Turn back to your neighbor one more time and say, neighbor, it ain't too late to come back to God. Come on, put your hand on your shoulder, shake them real good and say, neighbor, it ain't too late. It ain't too late. It ain't too late to come back to God. I don't know who I'm preaching to, but I stopped by to tell you, it ain't too late to come back to God. You may be sick, but it ain't too late. You may be broke, but it ain't too late. She may have served you papers, but it ain't too late. You may have been disbarred, but it ain't too late. They may have put you on the street, but it ain't too late to come back to God. I wonder if I got 3-4 people right here right now who want a new beginning. Just wave your hand and say, yeah. Wave your hand and say, it's me. It's me. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It ain't too late to come back to God. That's all I want to tell you. It ain't too late. It ain't too late. It ain't too late. It ain't too late. Yeah, it ain't too late to come back to God. We're standing all over the building. I don't know who all I'm talking to. I suppose I'm talking to everybody at a point. Talking through the window in the prism of my own experience. It ain't never too late to come back to God. In the end, it's not a matter of how much time we wasted. It's about the fact that we serve a God that can't seem to help himself. He will always respond to an honest and sincere petition for those who have blown it. If you're here today and you feel like your life does not reflect its true promise and purpose for whatever the reason, this sermon's for you. This sermon's for you. It ain't too late to come back to God. The doors of the church are open as the deacons take to the aisles. This is a time of soul searching. If you're here today and you don't have a church home, maybe this Samson stuff ain't your story. You just moved to town and you need a church home. I invite you to come, but if God is saying to you right now, you need to get up and come down to the altar, then you need to come on down here. Whosoever will, the doors of the church are open.